Good morning. Thank you very much for joining this very special virtual event with a true history maker, Congresswoman-elect Young Kim. 2020 has been one of the most transformative years in our history. From the pandemic to the U.S. election, we have witnessed so many events whose impacts will be felt for decades to come. As we prepare to finally turn the page on 2020 in just a few days, for me, it is so meaningful to host Congresswoman-elect Young Kim, who not only made history, but would be one of the most important figures to watch next year and beyond. Congresswoman-elect Young Kim does not need a long introduction. She was born in Incheon. She immigrated to the U.S. at a very young age. She lived in Guam, Hawaii, California, and graduated from USC. She's a mother of four. As an entrepreneur, Congresswoman-elect Young Kim also founded and ran her own business. She entered politics on the staff of Congressman Ed Royce, a great advocate of U.S. Korea partnership, and also a very close friend to AMCHAM. She was the first Korean American assemblywoman to represent Southern California. And this year, she joined two other Korean American women to become the very first to be elected to the U.S. Congress. Congresswoman-elect Young Kim's rise as a Korean immigrant to the national political stage has been an inspiration to millions in Korea and in the U.S. Her career is an incredible testimony to the capabilities of Korean Americans, as well as the strength of the American democracy. We have a huge turnout today, with a diverse group of participants from Korea and the U.S. who are so excited to get to know Congresswoman-elect Young Kim and to learn from her insights. In the audience today, we have many AMCHAM Board of Governors whose companies are well represented in California. We have the CEO of Northrop Grumman, Dong-ah, the CEO of Coca-Cola, Soo-Jung Choi, the CEO of Morgan Stanley, Steve Hahn, my good friend from Qualcomm, the CEO, O.H. Kwan, and the head of Asia for the Walt Disney Company, Liu Kang, joining us as well. We also have a few Korean business community leaders, Howard Lee, who is from Los Angeles. He runs Hea Steel. Mr. In-ok Cha of CJ, whose company has the famous mandu factory in the district. And from the media, we have Jin Moon from Arirang TV, and the CEO of Korea Times, Mr. Oh Young-jin. As a lot of people know, AMCHAM has done a lot of interesting projects with the Korea Times and interviewing global leaders, and this is another great example. In fact, I'm pretty sure that both Arirang TV and Korea Times would love to have you on the program. So without further delay, let's get this show on the road. I hope that the audience will be actively engaged in today's discussion. So please feel free to jump in with your questions or comments at any time, okay? Now, please say hello to Congresswoman-elect Young Kim. Say hello to everybody, okay?
Hello, everyone. Yeah. I know on the screen, I only see the handsome Chairman James Kim, but thank you so much for having me. I really looked forward to having this discussion. And many of you, some of you I already heard about, and many of you I probably met during my times working with Congressman Ed Royce and traveling to Korea. And some of you who may have come to the United States or in Washington and California, we may have had the opportunity to meet. But hopefully once this pandemic is under control and I get to travel to Korea, or when you come to Washington, I hope to host you, and I look forward to meeting you in person. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we're so excited. So let me get started with the first question.
Sure.
For me, I cannot help but mention that today's event is very special for me because you and I have a lot of overlaps, right? We both lived in Guam. We're both from Los Angeles. You went to USC, I went to UCLA, but at least my two sons went to USC, so it's okay. But my first question is, how has your background helped who you are and kind of how you achieve all your goals that you have set forth?
Sure. Thanks for that question. I get asked that question a lot, especially on the campaign trail. I always talk about my upbringing in Guam, and I'm so glad that you and I have this similarity. Immigrating to Guam, I actually finished my junior high school on the island of Guam, and then went to Hawaii for my high school education, and then came to California. Despite my parents' desire, they thought I will go to UH, but by growing up, I was first born in Incheon, as you mentioned in your introduction. So I was born by the water, grew up on the islands. And to me, by the time I graduated from high school, I said, you know what, this island life, it's beautiful, but it's small for me. So I told my parents, and they took the chance on me, and they believed that I can do and be independent person. So they were all, during those times I was moving around from one place to another, they were still living on the island of Guam. And so I became very independent from early on. But after I graduated from USC, and I'm glad that you're not holding that against me, because we went to rivalry schools. But after graduation, a year later, I actually got married. I met my husband while attending USC. So I always joke about how you can graduate and walk away from college with not just one certificate, but future husband. So we've been married for the last 34 years. We have 4 wonderful grown-up children. And we always talk about how lucky we've been to live the American dream. As most immigrants have done, my family came to US for the hope and opportunity that this great country provided for us. So for me and countless of immigrants who came to United States, we feel this is truly the land of opportunity. It wasn't easy, but through work, hard work and determination, I think we all can live the American dream. So how did it shape my life? From a very young age, my parents taught me that it is so important to pay forward and give back when you can to this great community and the country that gave us so much. And I remember living on the island of Guam. You probably remember there, it's so easy to get to the beaches, right? My mom would take me down to the beach regularly, and she would give me a trash bag and say, come on, pick up cans and bottles. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I thought it was just the act of cleaning up the environment. But later I found out that she would sell the cans and bottles we collected, and she would give the money to church as our offering. And it went on for so long that it was helpful to be the church's building funds. And that kind of experience and the lessons that I learned early on from my mom from that island has really shaped my desire for public service and have led me to where I am today.
I tell you, to go from Guam to where you are, it's an amazing accomplishment. So, big congratulations to you.
Thank
But
you.
I also want to congratulate you on your historic win in November election, especially after coming so close 2 years ago. And for the audience, because a lot of business people also go through challenging times, adversity. How do you come back from such a difficult situation from 2 years ago to win and beat the odds that you just accomplished in California?
I know, I worked with AdVoice for over 2 decades. I knew public service was calling for me, but I never thought 30 some years ago that I'd be running for office. So fast forward to 2018, 2020. You talk about how difficult it was to run for any office, right? In my case, especially 2020, my race was called 10 days after the election day. So that 10 days for me was like living on pins and needles, and also time of flashback of 2018. We all thought we won on election day. I kept the lead for about a week. I went to Washington for freshman orientation, only to come back to find that I didn't win. So that 10 days after election this year was very difficult time for me. Also thinking like, oh gosh, am I going to go through the same thing again? It wasn't more for me for the defeat potentially, but the people that believed in me and put their faith in me and trusted me to go for another rematch.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a very difficult time, but at the end of the day, I won by a landslide. When I say landslide is 1% or just over 4,000 votes.
Right.
So this is a great example of how every vote counts, right? And so how I won, I believe my campaign was very effective in getting out the message that especially with pandemic, people were just tired and frustrated about the gridlock. And so I've focused on telling them that I'm going to Washington to fix the gridlock that has held our country back. And I want to make Congress work for the American people again. So, using the sentiment, how people were so frustrated, I talked about how we need to bring common sense leadership and talked about how we need to work towards solution and get our economy back on track. And I've proven to be an independent leader, working across the aisle. And so I talked about my record in the state assembly, and I told them, I'm going to Washington to be your independent leader. We need more bipartisanship, not more partisanship. And that's what I offered. So that's, I think, being consistent with our message and also learning from 2018, we built a very strong ground operation. We outworked my opponent every single day. And we outraised my opponent. And that was very surprising because if you recall, my opponent is a California lottery winner. He won $266 million. He spent $10 million in 2018. I was really afraid that he might spend just as much, but surprisingly, he didn't. And my hard work and determination, like, I don't care how much he spends. That's not going to scare me. I'm going to outwork him, and he's $1 million is not going to scare me. So despite the pandemic, with that kind of like really passion to make a difference this time, we were able to bring together like 300 interns, high school students, colleges, and they helped to knock on over 150,000 doors despite pandemic, and they collectively made over 4.5 million calls, and we sent out close to 1 million text messages and even sending out handwritten postcards. This is how we were able to do it, and I think it's really telling. When I'm sorry, my answer is long, but I wanted to give the audience and you how difficult it was, but how with the right message, and if you're the candidate that fits the district, that talk like the district, that look like the district, you can win. California was a long gun conclusion that Trump was going to lose. But while the voters in California, 39th district, my district, they chose Democrat Joe Biden by 10 points. But they also elected a Democrat state senator. But they chose me, Republican, to represent them in the House of Representatives. So I think it's really important, if you have the right candidate, you need to support them and then just be consistent with your message.
And I think what you just shared with us is something that business people can learn from, even athletes, right? Your hard work, your perseverance, and just the never giving up mentality has really paid well for you. And I hope that the audience can take some good things out of that as well. But
in 2018, when after I lost, a lot of people encouraged me to come back. And you know what? I told them. I remember my very first interview after I lost. I said, "나는 한국 사람이에요. 나는 오뜨기처럼 wherever I am, whatever circumstance I'm in, watch me. I'm gonna just get back up like 오뜨기." And that's what I did.
So my next question, really talks about your Korean heritage. So obviously you're still very active with the Korean community, but how do you keep in touch with your Korean roots? Because I'm sure it had a big meaning, for your success today.
It does, because I'm an immigrant, I never forget and always remind myself of where I came from. And when I worked with Congressman Ed Royce as his Director of Asian Affairs, my job was to engage with the Asian American community, and especially with my Korean American community. In Southern California, the Korean community is huge.
Sure.
I mean, you went to UCLA,
Yeah.
so you know that, right? But constantly being in the Korean community and facilitating the Asian Pacific Congressional Advisory Council, which is it's a council that I formed initially to help Congressman Ed Royce, but later I found how it benefited me probably the most, right? Because I was able to keep my connection with my own community. And during the time I worked with Ed, I was working on Chorus FTA. The Congress had to go through the ratification process, so I was intimately involved with that. And I was the interlocutor for the U.S. Republic of Korea Interparliamentary Exchange Group. When Ed served as the chairman, I was the U.S. side interlocutor. These are the issues that allow me to work on and all helped me to keep in touch with my Korean roots. And the issues that matter to the Korean community, I was able to talk about it. And I think you mentioned we have a representative from Arirang TV.
Yes.
I have to tell you, while I was working as a congressional staff, I also had the opportunity to
Yes.
produce and host my own talk show called LA Soul on local TV station. It was KSCI. Now it's called LA 18. I did that for about 10 years. But I also, during that time, I think a few years later, I came back and I hosted the second season of Real Talk on Arirang TV. These are the platforms that gave me an opportunity to talk about and discuss political, community, and public affairs that affected our Korean community. My guest would always be someone who was interested or had connection to the Korean community. So I naturally became more aware of the issues and were able to keep up with my Korean roots.
Sure. Yeah. Jin Moon from Arirang TV, we do a lot with her as well. And she mentioned how, she's a big fan of yours. So I'm sure she'll reach out to you one day. And also, you and I talked about.
Hello.
You and I also talked about other friends from, Ambassador Sung Kim to Ambassador, Jo Yoon. They're both very proud of what you have done as a Korean American.
As I am of them too, our Ambassador Sung Kim and Jo Yoon, yes.
Yes. But from an AMCHAM perspective, you also had a successful business career. So, my question is, you ran a small business. Can you tell us a little bit more about your business side of it and how that background has also helped you shape your views and how you entered politics?
Sure. When I was a young girl, especially when I went to high school in Hawaii, I wanted to be an accountant or a businesswoman of some sort. So that's what I studied. I went to USC with the degree in business administration, but with the emphasis in accounting, because at the time they didn't have a separate school of accounting, but now it's one of the top 3, as you know, probably better than UCLA. But
Yes.
But after graduating, I worked as a financial analyst. At the time, there was a First Interstate Bancorp, the holding company. Now it's Wells Fargo. Many of you may or may not remember that. But that was my first job out of college, and I worked in the M&A, the merger and acquisition team. And then, after the mergers, I went to work for a Southern California manufacturing company as a controller. And shortly thereafter, I started my own business. You usually, learn from the trade. And I felt like, I'm working so hard. I'm making somebody else rich. I think I can do this. And so I started my own business, YK Connections. And it is a consulting company, but that I was able to work with other new business owners, entrepreneurs looking to build or expand their business in California. But it was a ladies' wear manufacturing firm. But from all of those, and while I was, over the years, as also working with Ed Royce, I was able to put all of that into practice and help others as well. But, because of my experience in business and in the private sector, I know how important it is to support your businesses. And I know what it takes to create an environment where jobs can be created and businesses can grow. So especially now when we're hurting with our economy due to pandemic, we need to work on pro-growth, pro-business policies to get our economy back on track. And that's how my, thought process is.
Wow. But, but I think running a business itself can be challenging, but I think getting into politics is one of the most difficult things that one can do. You talked about how serving the country was a big, need for you. But what really motivated you to enter politics? Because it's not easy, right? All the scrutiny, you have to run every 2 years in this, in this situation, and it's not easy, right? So
It's
why are you
certainly
doing
is.
this?
And it's hard. You're right.
Yeah.
And having to run every 2 years, a lot of people say, "Gosh, why don't you do it every 4 years?" It's not up to me. You got to change constitution and change it to 4, 6 years. But that's not up to me. But you talk about how I got into politics, and I talked about how my upbringing on the island of Guam has really shaped my desire to pursue the path of um, you know, giving back to this community. As with most immigrants, I wanted to pursue the path of being an accountant or be a successful business person because I wanted to have the financial stability. I saw how my parents struggled so much because, most of us went through that process, right? So I wanted some financial stability, and I thought maybe being a successful business person would provide me with that. But while I learned a lot from my business experience, the sense of service, the community service that I learned early on from my mom, and she's the one who had tremendous impact on me. And I always remember in my mind, you got to give back, young. You got to do something more than having a stable life. And my mom was a woman of faith. She would always pray that whatever the wealth that we gain, we need to be able to find ways to give back. So that led me to public service. It was, actually, it was my husband who was one of the founders of Korean American Coalition in the early 1980s.
Wow.
He actually introduced me to then State Senator Ed Royce. And then he went on to be elected to the United States Congress. So I just naturally continued to work with him and stay in the political arena. So I worked for him for 23 years. And altogether, I think it's been like 30 years or 3 decades. So I worked as his director of community relations, also as director of Asian affairs. And those were the times that I had unparalleled opportunity to serve and address the issues, not just for my own local community, but because of the work I was able to do with Ed, I had the opportunity to also address the issues in the international community. So I really got to work on important issues I cared about, and also work with ethnic communities who are very dear to my heart. We can talk about a lot of other things, but
Exactly.
I'm just so thankful and grateful.
But even I mentioned, Congressman Ed Royce in my earlier introduction to you. But we are at AMCHAM huge fans of Congressman Ed Royce. I remember hosting him here in Korea. A great gentleman. I met his wife, and we really, really wish him well. And for him to be kind of a mentor of yours for, 30 years, that's an
Yes.
amazing story. Amazing story. So please give him our best if you do see him again.
Yeah, I definitely will. In fact, I was just talking to him the other day, and I mentioned that I'm having conversation with AMCHAM Korea, and you mentioned Marie Royce. I'm sure she's also a good friend of yours too. She always talked to me about, do you know James? I go, you know how many James we have, especially James Kim? And now I'm connecting the dots, and Marie was talking about you. We come full circle.
Of course. Let's talk about some specifics of the campaign you ran, right? I think on the campaign trail you talked about immigration and how the immigration system, is not working well and it should be fixed. Could you elaborate on some of the challenges that we face in the U.S. immigration system and how,
Sure.
you think you could improve it? Because it impacts a lot of Koreans who may want to, go to the U.S. from South Korea.
Of course, because my family immigrated, we experienced the problems with our immigration system firsthand. and also working as a congressional staff for a long time. Through the office, I was able to help hundreds and hundreds of immigrants, especially those who want to bring their families from overseas. So we handled a lot of immigration related casework, and I witnessed the gridlock that our broken immigration system has affected so many lives. And I just truly believe from those experiences that our immigration system needs to be, it needs to be fair, but it also needs to be compassionate. At the same time, we need to first ensure border security. You know, if we don't secure our border, we wouldn't be able to know who is coming into our country. So we need to stop that illegal activity that happens a lot of times at the border and stop that illegal immigration problem that we have experienced for so many years. But at the same time, when I say we need to have a very compassionate immigration policy, we have a lot of millions of dreamers that we call DACA recipients, right? They have been here and have not committed crimes. Those are the folks that I'm talking about, where we need to treat them with compassion. And they came here at a very young age, and their parents, whose only crime is to provide better opportunity for their children. And so if they are productive members of our society and they have not broken any laws and they know no other country but the United States, I think we need to come up with a policy where we will be able to allow them to stay in the US without the threat of being deported. So, but at the same time, the system also needs to deal with visa overstays. We need to know who is in the country, and we need to know where they are. Our system is that when they come here, they disappear. We have a lot of different ways where people can come here as a visitor on a government, like fellowship program, like J1s. They come here on an E1, L1, so many different kinds. But once they're here, they disappear into the system. So we need to have a better job of keeping track of who they are. And this is where Congress failed to address this issue for so many years. And I believe I can bring that unique immigrant perspective in our nation's immigration debate.
Well, we're all looking forward to your thought leadership and execution on an immigration strategy that is a win-win for all the different constituents. You mentioned COVID-19 a lot during your campaign. I think it was one of your flagship issues. What is your plan to help America overcome the pandemic once you take office?
Yes.
And can you really make a difference, you think?
I hope I can. First of all, COVID-19 has upended everyone's lives.
Yeah.
And so my focus is to first fight to get this pandemic under control. But during that process, we also found how many people without quality healthcare system is really hurting. So we also talk about improving access and reduce costs while protecting those with pre-existing condition. Like my second daughter, she's now 30 years old, but she had 2 open brain surgeries when we found that she had a tumor. We didn't know that. And she's still recovering, she's fighting it. And so it's really important that our healthcare system make sure that there is a coverage for the individuals with pre-existing condition. And despite what my opponent said and attacked me that I don't support this because, it's a long story. I'm not going to go through that, but it is so important for me. And so I also want to talk about when we deal with healthcare, we need to deal with the surprise billing. And these are some of the big concerns that I'll be focusing on. But thankfully, we now have a vaccine that has started being distributed and administered. And you see in the news, so many people are now taking advantage of it. So what I would be focusing on is to make sure that Congress can support fast and effective distribution of vaccines so we can ensure that all Americans will have that access to the vaccine. I mean, finally, when I learned that we now have a vaccine, and that is when I first saw the shipment of 2 million vaccines being distributed throughout the United States, I finally said, hallelujah, we're finally seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. But truly important is that recognize that there are families, businesses that have been financially hurt, especially during this pandemic. So naturally, I heard a lot from the, especially businesses that are closing down. And in California, we have very inconsistent policies coming out of our, from the governor's office to different, parts of our state. So because of this inconsistent guidelines, we've had businesses closing. They said, I've had it. I've had it. I'm picking up. And then, that's why we have millions of people leaving the state of California. So that would be my number one priority too, to make sure that we do what we can to keep our economy moving again. And so I will be working on the next set of relief legislation. Although I'm glad to see that Congress is finally voting to pass, I believe it's like 900 billion or almost $1 trillion package. But this is something that I've been calling for, a bipartisan relief package since May, when our speaker introduced and passed the HEROES Act. The only thing they said, it was a bipartisan, but the only thing bipartisan about that bill was how partisan that legislation was. But even though we're just passing this $1 trillion relief package, in the media they are criticizing how this is too little, too late. But I say, not nearly enough, but better late than never.
Right.
People are hurting. We need to bring this relief, and I'm glad to see that they're doing it. But more importantly, as we fight this, we need to give businesses the flexibility to be innovative. Oh my God, I'm going to go on and on and on, because this is like so important for me. In the state of California, the legislature where I served, they passed AB 5. It's better known as Uber bill. This is the kind of thing that kills innovation and jobs. And so my goal as a newly elected member of Congress to ensure that this type of California's crazy bills do not become national norm.
So let's talk a little bit about the U.S. Korea relationship. A lot has changed from 70 years ago. And I think there's a lot of meaning, especially because you're a Korean American. So what do you think is the relevance of the U.S. Korea partnership in overcoming some of the challenges we face today?
I'm glad you asked that important question. Yes, so much has changed. But during that time, over the 7 decades, Korea has emerged as a major economic power, but so has China. China is now asserting itself in the region in a very, very concerning ways. The technological change has been breathtaking and is only increasing. And it creates wonderful opportunities, but also serious challenges, such as countering the cyber hacking. So I also want to say what hasn't changed is the importance of the US and South Korea's commitment to common democratic values and the importance of innovation and the entrepreneurship that you all bring to each country's economies. Unfortunately, the security threat of North Korea has not gone away. And that is the challenge that will require full cooperation and partnership between the United States and South Korea, as well as the surrounding allies, right? But that partnership is central to security in the region. And I would say probably more important in the worldwide too, because on a various political and security relationships play a key role here. I would like to say that as South Korea's role in the world stage increases, so will the importance of keeping this bilateral relationship. If it was strong, we've got to make it stronger.
In fact, that's one of the most asked questions of me. Where should Korea position itself between U.S. and China? And I always talk about something called diversification. But 30% of Korean exports going to China, I think diversification is very important. And when you see so many people in this ecosystem between U.S. and Korea, this is a real rock solid, partnership. Even our U.S. Ambassador Harry Harris, he always mentions the concept of rock solid partnership. So I hope that with you in a very senior capacity in the U.S. government, it would add to the two relationships between the countries. So we need you, okay? Another one is we obviously have a lot of big U.S. companies in Korea today. You saw the Board of Governors list that you showed me
Yeah.
earlier this morning. But what can U.S. companies in Korea do to support further the bilateral partnership between the two countries?
Well, I'd like to simply say, keep doing what you're doing. As we all know, there has been a pushback and a movement away from the free trade over the last several years. Um, Many Americans are concerned that the open trade system, especially those, protectionists,
Yeah.
they think that the U.S. took the lead. I mean, the open trade system that the U.S. took the lead in creating is very harmful. This is what they think. But much of that concern is focused, understandably, on China, but not all of it. And frankly, Korea's FTA has come under a lot of scrutiny. The business community can play an important role in that, to constantly make the case that free trade is beneficial to American workers and the United States national interest, and continually pushing for a fair and mutually beneficial economic relationship will be very important to the bilateral partnership between US and Korea. And that's a constant struggle, but it is something that is very necessary. Otherwise, you're going to see greater and greater stress in the US South Korea relationship.
In most of our messaging that AMCHAM provides, we use the word free, fair, and reciprocal trade constantly. So we stand completely aligned with your vision.
Yes.
The other topic I want to touch on is diversity, especially as it relates to women. You are an amazing role model for not just Korean Americans, but for women in general. What advice do you give to aspiring women leaders, both in Korea and in the U.S.?
That's another question I get asked a lot because, I'm a female immigrant, a woman now making history as one of the first Korean American women elected in this election cycle. I mean, it comes with huge responsibility. And especially for those aspiring women, I just want to tell all the women and girls that if an immigrant girl from South Korea can succeed and be your representative and work in the House of Representatives, you too can do that.
Yeah.
You can probably do better than I can. And I always share this quote that I use quite often is by Harriet Tubman. It says, every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars to change the world. I always remind people, dream big, because no dream is too big, no goal too high. You will always and sometimes fail, and you will run into obstacles, but don't let that stop you. Let those failures be a learning experience, and remember that it's a necessary part of success. Failure is not the opposite of success, but it is the stepping stone to being successful. And I always say, like Ralph Waldo Emerson also said, do not follow the path where it may lead. Go instead where there is no path and you got to leave a trail. But as you follow that path someone else left, you make your own mark along the way, right? So don't follow the path of others because it's simply safe. Create your own path. Be the trailblazers that paves the way for others because someone always has to be the first. And in this case, if I'm one of the first who are leaving the trail, I want other girls and women to also follow that and leave your own mark.
All right.
And
Well,
one more, be confident. You got to be confident in yourself and seek out other women in politics to mentor. So I always emphasize how important the mentor-mentee relationship is.
you're a true role model for a lot of women here, especially here in South Korea, because that's one of the challenges that the Korean society has, right? About women and business women in politics. And with all you've done, I hope that when you do return to Korea, we can host a great session with women leaders and whatnot here. So that would be
I look
that would be
forward to that.
terrific. But we have an interesting question from from the floor that I want to ask you. This is
Sure.
from the CEO of Qualcomm, a company that's headquartered in San Diego,
Yes.
and his name is O.H. Kwon. He is a Korean American, lived in California for many years. He's actually, he along with AMCHAM has been working with the Seoul City government for internship programs.
Oh.
And his question now is, he'd love to get Korean Americans from your state to take jobs as an intern in Korea. How can he work with you to make that happen?
Oh my God, that is a very, very
Yes.
good idea, and that's a great suggestion. We have annual expos that I've been participating in, and we also have a lot of F1 visa students from South Korea that are working here. So they're always looking for companies that they can work here. And then through the internship, hopefully they will be able to get sponsors to sponsor them and stay here. Likewise, there are a lot of second generation Korean American students, and they recognize in the past, when James, you and I, when we grew up here, our parents would emphasize how you got to speak English only because you don't want to be discriminated because of your accent. Now it's so different because of our ability to speak bilingual and understand the bicultural areas. It has only become our asset to becoming global leaders. So let's talk. Thank you for the question. I would love to see if I may be able to partner with you and somehow develop an internship/fellowship program, and then we can exchange our students and be able to give that opportunity. Let me tell you, that just reminds me, there is a Mr. Park Sun-gyu from KBS. Many years ago, he came here sponsored by the State Department, and he actually worked in our office. He worked 2 weeks in the district office. I was able to work closely with him. And then we had him transferred to Washington office. And he got to work behind the scenes and see how our laws are introduced, how we go through the hearing, congressional hearing process. All that became a very valuable experience for him. He went back, of course, and he wrote a book. And so I think it's becoming one of the textbooks where the South Korean legislators have been reading to, make themselves more familiar with. These are the kind of reciprocating experiences I love to share.
But that's why through this webinar, we can find, real good solutions to help your constituents too, right? And O.H. Kwon from Qualcomm just said he wants to hire some Korean Americans from the U.S. to come to South Korea. And I think this is just going to lead to more job creation and interesting opportunities for both countries. And we'd love your help on that.
Absolutely. One thing though, when you hire Korean Americans, make sure you don't break them into or hazing process where you need to take them to bar and drinking and all that, because I don't want them to turn out that way.
Of course.
I don't want them to think that South Korea is all about drinking culture, right? 술 문화. That's bad.
But I think the culture has changed a lot. So I think that with great companies like Qualcomm that are out here, they will make sure that these guys get the right treatment and they're learning about the right opportunities instead of the bad things. So you can count on me and OH that it will happen. And one of our board members, Patrick Yoon from Visa, he's also a Californian. He actually went to USC, so he's also helping lead this charge as well.
All right. I do know there is a very strong USC alums in South Korea. And several years back, when I traveled to South Korea with Chairman Royce, there was a specific, USC alums getting together. And I know it's probably one of the strongest alumni clubs, as is here in Southern California. And guess what? I found during my freshman class, there were 4 USC Trojans elected in this election cycle, and they're all Republicans. And then after that, our story went out and found that there were two more members already serving in their Trojans. So we decided to create our own Trojan Caucus.
Oh, that's great.
So,
And Michelle Steele is one of them, right?
yes,
Yes.
that's right.
The other question that I have from the floor, which I think is also quite interesting, and this is from the Chief Digital Officer of CJ. And I don't know if you know, but wherever Ed Royce goes, he's always talking about the mandu factory in his district, right? I've heard his lines so many times. So this is Mr. Inok Cha from CJ.
Yes.
His question is, and I just kind of read it out for you. I worry about California, especially Silicon Valley, because he feels that California is losing its competitive edge as a technological center. Companies like Tesla leaving the state. What is your assessment on this tricky issue? I know a lot of companies are thinking about moving out of California, high taxes and some of these challenges.
Gosh, I hope CJ continues to have your presence here, and none other than my own 39th congressional district in the city of Fullerton, the Mandu manufacturing firm. When it came, I think it was probably one of the first MOUs that the city of Fullerton signed to have your, Mandu manufacturing facility. And I remember participating. I don't know if you were there at the time. We did the grand opening, and then a few years back, later, when I was in the California State Assembly, I also led a state assembly delegation to go to South Korea. I really pitched. At the time, I met, I believe, chairman of CJ was Mr. Lee.
Swon, Mr. Swon, right?
Okay. So I met and I really pitched on the ability for CJ to expand their presence here in 39th district and in my, at the time, state assembly district. There are, municipalities and local governments that will be willing to work with you. I know state of California is already probably the worst business environment. You already know that. That's why you're thinking of moving out. But if there is anything we can do and work with local governments to make sure that your presence is continuing, I'll do everything I can. I know I don't want to lose you. I don't want any other businesses to consider leaving California. It's really telling when there are millions of Californians and businesses that left in the last decade or so, and we now are going through the redistricting process. We may be losing a district, congressional district or two because we lost so many. But that also comes with heavy price. When businesses leave, then it's only our loss. So please let us work with you. Don't give up on us.
Well, even companies like CJ, they continue to invest in America a lot. They just bought a large frozen food company called Sean's. So I hope that through your interaction with CJ, they will continue to invest in America, and hopefully in your jurisdiction.
Yes.
And when you come back, obviously, you need to meet with Mr. Cha and some of the senior leaders of CJ. Another question I have is on, just politics in general, just the gridlock in DC. And I think that, especially now, this is a pretty polarized country, and that's what I see in so many different, countries in the world as well. How much potential is there for meaningful progress on the 117th Congress, which is what you'll be entering?
Well, that is really a really important question. I campaign on the need to bring Americans together. Washington needs to act on so many issues, and we have a lot of work ahead of us in our country, especially when we're facing so many challenges. We have challenges here at home and abroad. And I really believe that if we can work across the aisle in a bipartisan manner, I hope that the next Congress can start to reverse the excessive partisanship that you rightly note has been increasing. So I'm going to Congress being very aware that I represent all of my constituents, regardless of what party they belong to. And I pledge to always ask myself, am I doing the right thing or am I doing the partisan thing?
Right.
But I also recognize and realize the system is very stressed and the forces of partisanship is getting stronger. And we saw that, I mean, during the last 4 years when our President Trump was fighting those very partisan forces. They wanted to bring him down. I mean, but I will be working with members of Congress who want to change that. And I think we also recognize that Congress reflects America and the Americans, people like me, hyphenated Americans. And all Americans in their everyday lives, we must also challenge themselves to be part of the solution, looking to come together instead of to divide. So I'm going to focus on healing the divide. And I hope people and the members of Congress will, I mean, I know we're going to continue to have differences. That's natural. But differences can be bridged, but only if partisanship is checked. So, this is why I'm so very optimistic. The reason is because I saw during the freshman orientation, I got to know so many member elects, and I'm encouraged by their willingness to break the gridlock by working across the aisle, making our government work for the people again. Let me tell you a little anecdote. In 2018, that one week when I thought I was winning, I went to freshman orientation 2 years ago. But a lot of members won, taking advantage from the blue wave and also green wave. In my case, my opponent spending $10 million of his own lottery money, right? But many of them went to Washington without any experience, no prior experience being an elected official. And so many of them didn't know what they were doing. I see the passion here. We all got there, especially in my case, I worked my butt off. I went there through my hard work. Yes, the party leadership helped me along the way. They helped me go through the process that I needed. But I really believe I got there. I don't know anybody anything other than the people that voted for me to bring that independent leadership they asked for, to work in that bipartisan manner to get our country moving. And so I see a lot of people wanting to do things and making a difference. We haven't even been sworn in to offices, but the freshmen elects are already, we have our own chatting room where we're talking about ideas. We already have two letters that we co-sign, sending it to the speaker. We want to get things done. And we have the willingness to break the gridlock by working across the aisle, making our government work for the people again. So you can count on us and have a lot of hope, but at the same time, pray for us.
But it really does seem like you ran a completely kind of a bipartisan look and feel, which obviously led to your success. And I think that's probably the best way to really get your agenda accomplished here in the next several years, minimum-wise. So here's another interesting question that's part of what we just talked about. The Korean National Assembly. I think you know a lot of the National Assembly men and women already. How do you plan to work with some of your counterparts in Korea to advance your agenda for the long term?
I think one of the good ways for me in a short term is one, as I mentioned to my leadership and also the steering committee, I'd like to serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee.
Yeah.
And you put on that committee, I think I can work to continue the relationship that I built while I was working with Ed Royce for a long time. And it would be, I guess it would be helpful for me to keep that momentum going. And also I served as an interlocutor for the U.S. Korea Interparliamentary Exchange Group. And that has been something lagging for the last few years since I left Ed Royce's office. And that is something that I want to I guess, resume or reactivated. And we will be able to have a reciprocating joint sessions, putting the issues that are important for U.S. Korea relations and help our two economies, two wonderful friends to continue that relationship. The relationship is only strong if we can maintain it, but we have to work for it. So I always say we have a lot of challenges here in domestic and abroad, but despite those challenges of late, the U.S. remains a critical force for stability, democracy, and economic growth worldwide. And the world needs us more than ever. The world needs us to work with our allies to really help shape the policy and to really continue that strong relationship with our good ally like South Korea is critically important. So I want to ask you at this time before we close, I mean, you can help me or support me by continuing to share your thoughts on business and the U.S. Korea, South Korea relationship. It's really important because you have a strong role. You already said there are a lot of California contingency working in South Korea. Use your voice, use your influence. And I thank you for that question from Qualcomm, how we can expand our strength and make it stronger. I think that that relationship is going to be critically important. And I really would love to do that. And I really hope that I get on the Foreign Affairs Committee.
Well, one thing we learned about, just as business people is, accountability is important and we like to execute. So I'm sure, the Qualcomm CEO will make a lot of these things a reality. But you should also know we have a couple of very close friends of ours from National Assembly, who's in the foreign relations side here, Assemblyman Park Jin, and also on the ruling party, Mr. Lee Sang-min. So these two are very, very close to AMCHAM, and they represent both sides of the equation. And I'm sure they'd love to partner with you to do things that make sense for both countries.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to continuing our work together. 나경원 의원님 called me personally to congratulate me. We are of the same age too, right?
That's right. No, she's a year younger than us.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
I have to tell you, during the time I served with Ed Royce, we have 특파원님들 working in Washington, and I was able to build a very strong relationship with our, Washington correspondent, 특파원님들. And then we found out quickly we share same age. Many of them are born in the year of Tiger.
Yes.
And they are 특파원님들 are probably more male dominated, but I was the only female in that group. So we organized our Tiger Club. And over the years, the last 2 decades or so, we kept in touch. And whenever I travel to South Korea, I just, like 최형두 의원님 is one of those. And then 윤경호 논설국장님 from 내일경제, and then there's few others from 조선일보 and others. So, I mean, this is what we mean by friendship. That goes a long way, and I really value that. So, once you're a friend, and when you maintain it, it could really help our two countries and then serve as a bridge between our two countries.
Well, as you start your official capacity as Congresswoman in January, you can really count on myself and AMCHAM to be a powerful platform for all you want to do in Korea. I believe that the U.S. Korea relationship is so important. Someone like yourself out there can only enhance the partnership. So I wish you a lot of success, and I think on behalf of AMCHAM and the audience, we are really, really happy that we were able to host you today. And this is going to be one of many, either in person or virtually, okay? So
I look forward
thank you so
to
much.
It. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And Merry Christmas, okay? And Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to you all.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.